Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for tuning in. In today's video, we're going to look at a very interesting topic regarding DNA, specifically how we use DNA to map out details on human ancestors, while addressing some creationist claims, of course. Surprisingly, there's a lot of information we are able to dig up just by looking at the nucleotide sequences within our genome. Scientists are already doing a lot of work to reveal all sorts of facts, from when genes developed in human history to detailing the migration of ancestral populations, to even relatively recent events such as the genetic legacy of Vikings. We've mapped out so much just from our DNA that we can estimate how related you are to Vikings, if you provide your DNA, that is. Have you ever heard someone claiming to be a Viking descendant after getting their DNA checked? It's actually quite common, but varies depending on where you're from. After passing down their genes for 1,000 years, Vikings have spread their DNA to a large portion of today's population, with an estimated rate of 1 in 30. And in this video, I'm going to explain how we know that, and also refute the claims of some creationists who twist this branch of natural science to fit their narratives. But before that, a quick message from this video's sponsor. With a general estimated 1 in 30 people being descendants of Vikings, and we having 90,000 subscribers, that means there are approximately 3,000 Viking descendants amongst us. So, in the name of Odin, I urge you to join me in 20 million Vikings in the most epic battle of the month on mobile. If you want to put your strategy skills to the test, this is a great game for you to do so. Energize your Viking blood and use the link in the description to get 200 gold initial protection shield and your place in Valhalla. I've been playing this game myself for the past 2 weeks, and so far I'm greatly enjoying it. Find me there by the username p_stick. Thanks for listening, guys. I would also like to thank Vikings War of Clans for sponsoring this video. It's not often that brands are willing to sponsor the type of content I create. Now let's talk about DNA, and Vikings of course, and then we'll disassemble some creationist claims. On some general information about Vikings, they lived between the 8th and 11th centuries and is characterized by their exploration skills, military, and settlement expansion. They were tough people who loved combat, fighting with spears and axes as primary weapons. And as I said in the beginning of the video, we can see how related today's people are to Vikings just through DNA. Researchers have looked specifically at a particular haplogroup called IM253. Haplogroups are essentially just genes that are solely inherited from one parent, as opposed to regular genes where you receive half from each parent. Now, a great place where haplogroups reside is in the Y-chromosome, since this chromosome is solely inherited from the father only. Due to this feature, we can use Y-chromosomes to trace back to people in the past. The presence of haplogroups can give a lot of information of your ancestry and can even determine how related two people are. Looking back at haplogroup IM253, genetic tests reveal that this marker is present mostly in people from Sweden and Finland. There's a lot of interest in this haplogroup specifically due to the fact that it had its highest intensity during the Viking period, revealing itself in all northern European countries where the Vikings have invaded. From this, we can make conclusions about the paths of Viking invasions, and at the same time, we can determine how related someone is to Vikings by studying haplogroup IM253. I will cover this later on in the video if you're curious about molecular dating. Now, IM253 isn't the only haplogroup we are interested in when it comes to Vikings. Another one named R1A1A was also carried by the Vikings, and similarly to IM253, it can be used to map out the genetic legacy of Viking invasions found through the Y chromosome of modern humans. This is the power of DNA. Not only does it hold information on the appearance or personality of organisms, it also contains the secrets of the past. And if you listen close enough, it will reveal so much knowledge on human and natural history. Vikings isn't the limit of what we can discover through haplogroups. We can go back even further, before any trace of civilization was established. And the further we look into the past, the more related everyone seems to be. That's right, I'm talking about an ancestor in which all human beings have descended from. Religious people call it Adam and Eve. In science, and in reality, we call them y-chromosomal Adam and Mitochondrial Eve. More on this right after a break. Now then, how is everything I said up until now related to creationism? I couldn't just make a video that was just 100% educational, could I? I have to debunk something. I'm sorry, it's just who I am.
Does human mitochondrial DNA evidence support the biblical time frame?
Okay, so let's talk about Mitochondrial Eve first. We already know how haplogroups are passed down in males through the Y chromosome. So how does it work in females? You see, the mitochondria is a unique organelle in the fact that it contains its own DNA, separate from the nuclear DNA we all know and love. The other unique part of mitochondrial DNA is that it is only obtained from the mother, which means when you were conceived, you received all of your mitochondrial DNA from your mom and nothing from your dad. So, due to this amazing property of the mitochondria, mitochondria we are able to trace back in human history on the female side, and if you go back far enough you will eventually hit a point in which all humans are related. Tracing the mitochondrial DNA, this eventually leads us back to the most recent ancestor of all humans, which we call Mitochondrial Eve. Molecular dating estimates this woman to have lived roughly between 170,000 to 100,000 years ago. How do we know this? Well, there are many things to consider, but I'll give a general outline here. DNA has a mutation rate. That is, we can estimate the amount of mutations that occur over a period of time, as long as we know what the mutation rate is. Therefore, by utilizing this mutation rate and sampling a large sample of human beings to compare the differences and mutations of every individual, scientists can work backwards and determine at what time this DNA was the same. Now, of course, there are many other factors that come into play, which I shall get into later in this video. But knowing this, creationists have a new enemy to battle. Since they believe the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, they have been challenging all sorts of dating methods we have, such as radiometric dating and carbon dating. Well, now there's a new problem they have: molecular dating. Not many creationists really know what molecular dating is, but of the few that do recognize its presence, some have come out to try to debunk the estimated age of Mitochondrial Eve.
Now, something you need to know about molecular clocks: they are not an independent measurement of time. They are based on certain assumptions about the past. They are calibrated according to certain things. The main things that they are calibrated with is that basically assuming that the fossil record is accurate, radiometric dating is accurate, and that humans have diverged from chimps.
Molecular clocks do need calibrating, mostly due to the fact that the method itself can't produce exact dates, so it is dependent on other things such as the fossil record and radiometric dating. Perhaps that's why people battling creationists don't really bring this up. But of course, that means if the concepts molecular clocks are based on is true, then it itself is true. So maybe it's a good idea for you to start with those concepts. I do want to hear what else you have to say about molecular clocks though, so let's skip right to the juicy part.
Now, how do these two things relate? Mitochondrial DNA clock and Mitochondrial Eve. Well, a man by the name of Parsons, a scientist back in 1997, published a paper where he looked at the control region, that regulatory region of mitochondrial DNA, as a molecular clock. So he was going to use that to study some relationships. And what he expected to find was that there would be one mutation every 12,000 years. That's what he expected to find. Why did he expect to find that? Because based on the fossil record, based on radiometric dating, all of those things that humans diverge from chimps, that's what they had already assumed the rate would be.
The rate of mitochondrial DNA mutation isn't really set in stone in the common literature. Some estimate it to be higher, some estimate it to be lower. It can be quite difficult to really map out exactly at what speed mutations occur. We do know that the mutation rate is higher than in nuclear DNA though, mostly due to the oxidative stress it has to endure from the aerobic respiration taking place in the same organelle. Multiple people have done calculations on what the age of Mitochondrial Eve is, and by extension they have used various rates of mutation based on either other literature or a refined value they calculated themselves. But let's hear what Parsons found.
But they found something very different. Now, what he was looking at was modern human DNA. Mothers, daughters, grandmothers, granddaughters, looked at 327 different generational events and found that actually the mutation rate is much, much quicker. It's one mutation every 800 years. Okay, that's orders of magnitude faster than what they ever expected.
Yep, we've all heard creationists pull this one out before. Whenever we do something like this, creationists will always try to mess with the speed or rate of a variable as a counter-argument. The age of the universe, for example. Some creationists will claim that perhaps the speed of light was multiple magnitudes greater than it is today. In this case, they're trying to quicken the rate of DNA mutations in the mitochondria in order to promote a younger Earth. Let's let her finish first.
Now, that in and of itself isn't so much of a problem, but it is a huge problem for them when you apply it to human evolution. Because the problem is that Mitochondrial Eve becomes 6,000 years old.
Parsons, the guy whose research you presented, didn't even say anything like that. And this is a thing creationists like to do as well. They like to cherry pick one source that never had the intention of supporting a young Earth and then jumping to the conclusion that the young Earth is true. Just like this, the woman here didn't even show us if the author said anything that pertained to a 6,000-year-old Earth, or the Eve in the Bible. And you know why? Because the researcher didn't have any intention of linking this to the biblical account of creation whatsoever. Of course, this is just one study out of many. The only thing we can conclude from here is that perhaps there are exceptions in certain results. Or maybe there was some external factor that increased mutation rates in the mitochondria for that one study. I won't get into the tiny details for now, but the general consensus of mitochondrial DNA marks this ancestor to 200 to 1000 years old. Do you know what else would have to be true in order for your claim that mitochondrial Eve is the Eve depicted in the Bible? Y-chromosomal Adam would also have to be 6000 years old. Currently, it is dated to about 300 to 150,000 years ago. Yes, Adam is indeed older than Eve according to the molecular clock, but all this is referring to is the most recent mitochondrial and Y-chromosomal common ancestor, rather than the most recent common parent. Now, creationists have tried to increase the mutation rates for both the Y chromosome and the mitochondria, and here's why it doesn't work. The way in which our mitochondria DNA is differentiated around the world can show us the moments of early humans across the globe. The distribution of different mitochondrial DNA sequences cannot be explained in a mere 6,000 years. To cherry-pick one or two studies that support your worldview and then twisting their conclusions to fit your narrative is just a gross misrepresentation of science. Anyway, this is the end of this video. What have we learned today? That DNA is a powerful tool giving us haplogroups to study and discover things about natural history. Although creationists are attempting to debunk this powerful tool, it doesn't seem very successful. After all, if you're going to change the mutation rates of the mitochondria and Y chromosome, you will change a lot of what we know, and that could have large effects on our knowledge of more recent history. Like the Vikings, for example, could be dated to a much more recent part of history if the mutation rates were increased by the creationists, and I don't think our archaeologists and paleontologists would really appreciate that, since the more recent parts of history can be cross-verified in many different ways that creationists don't even dispute. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to check out Vikings War of Clans. Just by playing a free game, you'll be supporting this channel, and I greatly appreciate anyone who is willing to do that. Thanks again, and see you all next week.